So we usually last 10 to 15 minutes for like audience questions. Oh, 7:45. 7:45, 7:50. Yeah. And then if there's like a ton more questions, we'll like usually cut it off. Exactly. Yeah. Like once you're ready to go for like the audience questions, we'll do those, and then it'll match like just up there. And then I'll be like, all right, time to move on to sign. And yeah, I'll do that, and then I can even pass it to you. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Alrighty. Good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Baird. I'm an event facilitator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. And before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 territory, which is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Aninawak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, as well as the homeland of the Red River Métis. Additionally, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. And of course, we're all very happy to be here for the launch of the Moth Dreamer by Amy Lynn Farrell. Many thanks to HighWater Press for publishing this book and for working with us to make this evening a reality. Just to let you know how the evening will play out, immediately following my introductions, we'll be joined up here by the podium for a reading from Amy, as well as to discuss on the book. Following that, there will be our conversation portion, hosted, of course, by Stephen Sim. Let's give a round of applause for him. And then following that, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions. So if you do have a question tonight, just raise your hand high enough for me to see, and then I'll come by with this wireless microphone, which is just to ensure that you're heard on tonight's live stream for the folks watching at home. And then I'll be back at the end to review how the signing procedure will go to the table on my right. But now I have the pleasure of introducing tonight's special guests. Our host, Stephen Sim, is a world-renowned improv performer and instructor. He's the co-director of the Improv Company, focused on improv classes, applied improvisation training for professionals, and public speaking coaching. He's also the artistic director and founder of the Winnipeg Improv Festival. Stephen also loves hosting live events and looks forward to engaging with you in person. And Amy Lynn Farrell is a professor at the University of Manitoba, focusing on Indigenous education. A member of Ieyameithong First Nation and Anishinaabe by heritage. Amy grew up with a foot in both Indigenous and non-Indigenous worlds. Her mother's family comes from HighWater Lake in Northern Ontario, while her father is of Scottish, Irish, and English descent. Amy loves creating worlds that blend dreams and fantasy into real-life settings, exploring the paradoxes and dualities of life. She currently resides in Winnipeg. And to tell us more, please join me in welcoming Amy Lynn Farrell.
So, hello, bonjour. Stuff here. I'm kind of giddy on the inside, even if I'm not sure. So many of my friends and family are here, so thank you for coming. I'm going to read a few different sections from the book for you today, kind of in sequential order. Hopefully not enough to give too much away, just to snap them out. So this first passage, Saturday, October 7th. Guns were ready, ammo was accounted for, knives, canvas, bags, and cleaning rags were packed. Sandwiches, snacks, and travel mugs of coffee and hot chocolate were made. In the last-minute scramble, Dad went searching for his hunting license. Our family's traditional hunting lands were in our ancestral home and treaty territory. Only Dad needed a hunting license. The rest of us just had to bring our status cards. The minivan was packed up, and Dad and Grandpa Benny hooked up the utility trailer, optimistic that we would indeed find and shoot a moose. We launched ourselves excitedly into the van, ready to head to Red Waterfalls. When we finally arrived, everyone set to grabbing their bags and supplies. Mom and Auntie set about putting everything in the fridge and getting brunch ready for everyone. They didn't need any more help, so I plopped myself onto the couch. Dad had just turned on the generator that sat behind the building. It was already quite cold out, and we could see our breath in the air. The leaves had all started to turn and were falling from the trees. A light layer of snow carpeted the ground. It'd probably melt soon, though, as the weather always fluctuated before the deep cold set in and the snow finally stayed. Suddenly, I thought of Sagate's gravesite. I hadn't visited it since her funeral and felt a pang of guilt telling me I should have. Was there a light layer of snow over her grave? How cold would the ground get? Would she freeze solid like a brick? I shook my head, trying to rid myself of the gory thought. I wished she was here with us. Your cabin rooms need to get set up, Auntie yelled from the kitchen. It was a not so gentle reminder that work still needed to be done. I felt thankful for the errand. Ish and Wolf moved their bags into the same cabin where they had bunked together during our last visit. I took the same cabin as well, the one next to theirs. It was just as I had left it. The little alarm clock sat on the side table. I plugged it back in and set the time. As we waited for brunch to be ready after settling in, I walked with Dad down the beach. We saw some old bear tracks near the brush line, but there weren't any moose tracks here. We doubled back and walked along the curve of the bay. Finally, we saw fresh moose tracks. After brunch, we got our hunting gear ready and our hunting clothes off and headed to follow the tracks around the curve of the bay. I slung the bow across my back in its holder and checked the quiver on my belt to make sure the arrows were clipped in. Grandpa Benny took a couple minutes to say a prayer. When he finished, he laid tobacco down on the ground. Ish and Wolf were already at his side, asking him what he was doing. Grandpa Benny explained that saying a prayer of heart thought to get Manitou and putting down tobacco was the best way to ask for a successful hunt. We walked for about half an hour before Grandpa Benny paused to look at some tracks in the soggy, cooling ground. He kneeled and gathered Ish and Wolf next to him. See those? Grandpa asked the boys. Those are moose tracks. They're fresh, only a day old. And there, Grandpa gestured toward a small trail of tracks emerging from under some low-hanging branches. What is it? Wolf asked, crouching near the little rabbit travel trail. Rabbit tracks. Those are the front paws. And those are the back feet of the rabbit, Grandpa explained as he gestured to the rabbit tracks. See over there? There's some rabbit scat near the trail. Ish furrowed his eyebrows and said nothing. Rabbit poop, Grandpa clarified. Ew, Ish wrinkled his nose, but cool? Animals don't like noise, you know, Grandpa said in a hushed voice. They like the quiet, so loud noises and talking and loud footsteps can spook them, and the birds. He pointed up to the trees. They will see us and tell all the other animals that those humans or predators are nearby. You'll hear them chirp and whistle up a storm. Predators, Ish said under his breath. Like coyotes, Grandpa? Yes, like coyotes. He smiled at Ish. But don't worry about coyotes here. There's too many of us, and they would avoid humans as much as they can anyways. They were never friendly to us like dogs are. Grandpa chuckled to himself. You know why dogs sniff each other's butts? Ish and Wolf laughed and asked why. Because that Whiskey-Jack liked playing tricks on animals and people way back when. And he tricked them dogs, you see. He saw that they were having a meeting. Back then, dogs would have meetings and would have their furs hanging outside the wigwam, like we hang up our coats. See? Grandpa Benny asked the boys, judging their interest in the story. He continued. So Whiskey-Jack saw they were having a meeting and switched up all their furs. Grandpa Benny leaned in, as if he were about to tell a fantastic secret. Ish and Wolf were giggling. And then he ran into that meeting of theirs and scared them all, and they ran out of the wigwam. But they were in such a rush and scared, you see, that they grabbed whatever fur they saw first. So now, them dogs sniff each other's butts because they're trying to find the right furs. What if Ralphie skips my butt? Ish asked. Well, I don't think he thinks you're another dog, Ish, Grandpa Benny said. Maybe you just have on some stinky underwear. No, I don't, Ish retorted, but laughed. Grandpa loved to tease. I'm going to skip forward a little bit. A few months later. After changing into my PJs, and even though it was pretty late, I decided to watch another horror movie in the living room. Almost everyone was asleep in bed except for Eddie, who hadn't yet returned from hanging out with her friends and Val. Kokum had the TV turned down low as it played on an old Western movie. She liked coming into town to see us all dressed up and then help hand out candy to all the little costumed kids who would present themselves on the doorstep. That's so creative, she'd say to almost every kid. Sometimes she meant it, sometimes not. She was asleep now, some in-progress beadwork still resting in her hands. I took it, being careful with the needles, and placed it back inside the old cookie tin can she used to store her work. I relaxed on the couch and stared out the living room window to the street beyond. The wind was becoming colder and colder every day. It was probably going to snow any day now. The orange, crunchy leaves on the ground were inviting that fluffy stuff to come and fall on all of us. I looked at the bush that was in the front yard, the same bush Whiskajack had been standing in the other night. I saw something move. Illuminated by the dim streetlights, something small was darting in and out from behind the thick bush. I watched as it came out again. Standing on top of a pile of the leaves was a very tiny, we're talking under a foot high, person. You see them? Kokum asked, her question like a trumpet blaring in the quiet house. I hadn't heard her awaken and was startled. At first I thought she might have been talking in her sleep. They're the Anishinaabe, she said knowingly. Then, seeing the perplexed expression on my face, she added, they're the little people. They're allowing you to see them. It is a privilege to see them. But why? She smiled and stood slowly from the couch, her bag hip rocking as she gained her balance. She rummaged around in her tote bag and pulled out her smudge bag. She motioned for me to go to the back of the house. I wondered why not the front yard. In the backyard, she lit a blend of 4 medicines: cedar, sweetgrass, sage, and tobacco. She used pipe tobacco for her smudge, since she was also a pipe carrier. As she lit the mound of medicines in the abalone shell, it quickly began to smoke, and she let me gather the smoke in my hands and bring it over my head and down my body. I held the shell next, and Kokum did the same. Again. So dreams are a very important part of this particular novel. So I'll read one particularly powerful dream that Aubrey, the main character, has. Friday, January 5th, after midnight. I stood there at the entrance of the woods, the wind blowing wisps of snow around me and along the park's path. I ran up the hill and around the bend. I continued down along the path near the river, and gasping for breath, I tugged my coat closer around me. I ended up in the clearing. The clearing was no longer empty. Homes, wigwams, other small structures, and log benches all stood in a snowy circle. A large fire burned in the middle. Like a moth to a flame, I walked to the fire, enchanted by its warmth. I stood there and felt the heat of it seep through my coat and warm me. Looking more carefully around me, I noticed that the camp was too quiet. I walked to the nearest wigwam and bent low to look within. There were people lying inside. They were too still to be sleeping. They were dead. A growling sound came from inside of one of the nearby wigwams. Long, sinuous, bloody arms reached out of the open door. It crawled out and then stood. It looked emaciated, but fierce, inhuman. My body tensed, knees bent, ready to run. I watched as the creature went from wigwam to wigwam, from person to person, dragging the limp bodies to the center fire. The smell of flesh and hair wafted into my nose. I gagged. Tears flowed down my cheeks, the salt of them seeping into the corners of my mouth. I finally tore my eyes from the horror and looked around. Whiskey Jack, awkwardly tall and lanky, crawled out from the opening of a wigwam. The monster stood on the opposite side, watching me with hollow, attentive eyes. He seemed to have been waiting for me, watching for my reaction.
Amy, first I want to say congratulations. This is so exciting.
It's very exciting.
It is
Yes,
very
thank you.
exciting. This is like, you did a reading, we're gonna do a Q&A, you're gonna do a book signing. That's like the most exciting thing.
It is.
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask you some questions. That's my job right now. So the first one I wanted to ask was, I think that maybe like part of the story or the story was inspired by a dream.
Yes.
So not only is dream
Mhm.
like central to the book, it's like that's how it came to you.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if you could like expand on that idea. Like, did you dream the entire thing beginning to end and you were just like, oh, that's easy. I'll just write it. Or yeah, I know. I didn't think that was true, but so little parts of it, or maybe yeah, explain.
Yeah, so at least like for a lot of Anishinaabe people and other indigenous people's dreams have a lot of significance to us. There's a lot of teachings that we get from dreams. And when we think like researchers and indigenous researchers, a lot of folks include dreams into their own like writings. Right? So it's a part of something that we can definitely learn from. But this book, I had a dream a long time ago, and it was a recurrent dream of a woman standing in like a really old-looking kind of chemise white gown, and she was just strong but also frightened looking. So that I dreamt of quite a bit, like at least half a dozen times, I think. And that kind of makes an appearance in the very beginning of my novel.
Okay, so you're having this like reoccurring dream with this figure.
Yeah.
And so some of the story sprung from that dream, or
It's probably a little bit from the dream, but also like the feelings in the dream, right? The sense of tension and fright, but also this feeling of, standing tall and feeling strength.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So at what point were you like, I'm gonna take these dreams and write a book? Or were you thinking of writing a book and there's different stories that were coming up from the book and the dream helped inform on that?
The dream happened before the book.
Yeah.
And then when I was starting to think about writing the book, I had that dream again, and kind of felt like it needed a purpose, that I had to include it somewhere.
Mhm.
And I haven't had the dream since.
That was gonna be my next question. Tonight, probably. So I mean, I've got just so many questions, and also I don't want to have spoilers in any of my questions either. So that's important. I want to spoil anything, and I hope that this isn't too much of a spoiler. So the Luna moth is Aubrey's spirit insect or spirit name.
Yeah. For her, it's both.
Right. And so then what's the importance of the Luna moth to you?
My family and I used to camp at Sandbar Lake, Provincial Park. It's near Ignace. And in behind like the washroom facilities and the laundry, there was this back door to the laundry room that was always lit up. And I remember one of the first times I saw the Luna moth on the door, I was scared because as a child it seemed huge, but it wasn't doing anything. It was just like irrational child fear.
Right.
And then my mom had told me what it was. And I think from then on, like knowing I didn't need to be afraid of it, I just had like a great fascination of this insect.
Okay, that makes sense. So this idea of like fear, but then courage in the face of fear, which
Yeah.
don't spoilers, but that fits. That fits.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I like that. Like, no, that's just. Who's your favorite character to write in the story? Like, you become close to all of the characters, but he's already answering.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I started to enjoy it.
No hesitation, the Kokum
No,
is my favorite character in the novel. She's kind of spunky, she's very powerful, she knows a lot, but isn't like really pushy about sharing her knowledge. She usually waits for Aubrey to come to her,
Mhm.
but is very ready and willing to share what she knows to help Aubrey out. Yeah.
Yeah. Fun to write that one.
Yes.
And did you feel as though you were that you had control of that character, or did that character just have a life of their own and you were like, oh, this is what Copeland is gonna do?
I definitely had those moments where it's like, I was like, oh, it should go this way, but then the Kokum character wasn't feeling it.
Yeah. That is interesting. I want to ask you. I want to ask you a little bit about the writing process a little bit. Do you plan out the story beats ahead of time, or are you more of a let's start with an idea and then see where it takes you?
I do that now where I plan. Writing this was like definitely a good learning process. Like there were things I had it sort of sketched out, but found I was definitely going back a lot to add some things in those early edits and drafts. Now I'm much more methodical, a bit more type A.
You learn to become type A. You're like, you know what?
Yeah.
Having some of those beats planned out.
Yes.
You like that.
Yeah, and I can jump around a little bit more in having things planned out, but also especially to make sure that the cultural components I would like to see in there, that they're planned out, that it becomes more intentional rather than something haphazard or by chance.
Right. Okay. And so, what were some of the cultural aspects of this book that were like important for you to include or to explore?
Yeah. So primarily there was the like 7 sacred teachings, like courage, love, bravery, honesty, truth, wisdom. Am I missing one?
Probably not.
So those I wanted to intentionally put in. Some of them were very intentional and other things just came out about naturally within the writing process of the novel. And then I also wanted to ensure that I had some like cultural ethics and rules of behavior, like non-competitiveness, non-interference, democracy, basically having your own choice and volition. Hence why Coco didn't really push her.
Right. Yeah. Back to some of the writing process question. Can you read other books while you're in the writing process? You're in writing mode, and then are you able to just like, oh, I'm gonna read a book too?
I do audiobooks a lot. I found that helps me with that separation. But I definitely love, like I kind of need that other creativity feeling.
Right. So when you're in that creative process, you're still consuming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I love story, it's always there.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have an audience in mind when you were writing this book?
Definitely teenage girls. I love like I love reading YA, like young adult novels. I liked Twilight before it became popular.
We all liked it before it was popular.
I bought it when there was like 2 of its books on the shelf at Checkers. This was in front of me. Just to clarify. And so I think, that kind of my gravitation toward the young adult genre, obviously writing from that perspective of like teenage girl, obviously made sense for me. And I have a lot of enjoyment in that perspective. I think there's so much that can be done to tell us about like our growth as people.
Now I asked you this before already, but I'm going to ask again because I know that Aubrey plays the flute, and you also play the flute. And so for me, when I was reading it, I was like, oh, there's a direct connection there. And so I was wondering how much parallel is there between Aubrey and yourself?
Yeah.
With the things that she does or some of the experiences that she had. Yeah. If you care to share that.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
So, I'll give some examples. So yes, the flute, and my flute teacher, Lori, is here. I love playing the flute, and there's a lot of connection between me and Aubrey in the novel. It made sense. There was already so many pieces of me in her. There's scenes of her learning how to use the bow and arrow, so that was something I had practiced as well. She does beadwork, I do beadwork. One of the scenes too, like, and there's definitely some scenes in there that have come from my life, but there's a scene with the bullies and some very not so nice choice of words from some of them. When I was in my PhD, in my first year, it was like a joint PhD and with a few universities. So I was at Windsor at the time, and one of my classmates was not a great person.
You want to name any names?
It started with a B.
Classic.
And so one of the things that he kept telling me that like I wasn't native if I didn't live in the bush, and because I didn't live in the bush and like hunt and stuff, I wasn't native. And he was not indigenous. His wife was, from my understanding, and I had some of my own choice words with him, no swearing, because this was in class. But I had no support from the instructors. My peers were sympathetic toward me, and I kind of followed some of cultural protocols and pretended he was exiled from the community, and I ignored him for the rest of the program and would ignore anything he said and just start different conversations in class. But so that inspires the bullies in the novel. Long story short.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm gonna go back to some more writing, and that is where do you write best? Like maybe if you could describe like your writing space.
Yes.
Or do you have like a?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have like I make myself. I bind myself my own book to start writing in and doing research in. So I had, so a long time ago, I had some time off and learned how to do Coptic stitch bookbinding.
That's so cool. So
yeah.
So the process began with you creating the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to then write and research it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like this whole process, and then when I'm like writing, like typing things out, like I light a candle. Yeah. And I like rocks, so I've got my like selection of rocks around me. And then I have a glass desk, so it's this whole thing.
Continue.
Yeah, it's like, and the kitties, yeah, my cats, I have 2 cats and they're very clingy. They're always there and they often interrupt me, so, and I usually say yes to kitty snuggles.
They know when you need a break. That's maybe part of it.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
And so then you're typing on the computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's when you. And do you schedule that? Is it like in the morning I'm doing an hour, I'm doing like 2,000 words, or every day, or?
Depends on how much of a deadline I'm in.
Okay, so it's deadline driven.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, otherwise, like, I think it was a couple years ago now, so I have a draft of a different novel that's out, and I had a very tight schedule, I had word counts, I had my whole, like, structure of my plot and scenes, and the contents for all of those scenes, and page length, so that was, I knew what I was going to do, and I could hop around, yeah, so now I'm just poking away randomly at it.
Okay. So this is your next.
Yes.
Your next. You want to talk about that at all? Or no, it's a secret.
It's not a secret. It's kind of indigenous speculative fiction dystopian. Bit of sci-fi.
Working title? Is it a working title?
A working title is called The Star Woman. So in our cultural sacred stories, we have stories of beings who come down to Earth, star people,
Okay.
and this features one of them.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. Because that led beautifully into my next, which was what are you working on now? And did you hand bind a book? Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, so that one's full, and then I have, because that one's in like a finished draft now, I'm starting research on historical folk horror fiction about First Nations women during the fur trade era. So I found era.
With a nice slip.
So I had found a book, so that's where my notes and stuff and initial thoughts go in.
So it's like it's almost like that you're gonna write a new book because you're like, oh, I feel like I've got to find a new book.
Yeah.
So now I know I have to write one. Something like that.
Yeah, and I usually try to make sure like how I decorate it matches the theme.
Oh. So cool. And then, do you use your dreams to inform?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's just a part of the process.
Yeah.
So do you have a dream journal?
I usually take notes. Otherwise, I usually just try to make sure I'm actively remembering it.
Yeah.
But I do have a journal beside my bed and a pencil.
Yeah, we call that a dream journal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think. Oh no, we still have some time. We still have some time. Now I asked you already. Were any of the characters besides Aubrey, which you already mentioned, taken from real life?
Totally.
Yeah.
I think it's just like the
that
dynamics.
that you want to be able to talk about.
Yeah, like so definitely like her family dynamics very much like echoes my own family.
Okay.
Right. And like like the Kokum, I often like wish I had learned to speak Ojibwe when I was young, so I could talk to my Kokum more. So that's how I wish that I had been. So Aubrey and Kokum had really great talks.
So also reading it too was like, ooh, I wanted to be able to pronounce some of the words that reading them, not just like seeing the word, but I love to hear the word too. And so it makes me curious to know if you're hoping to have a version of the book translated or in another language or in some other languages?
Well, because of my love of audiobooks, I'm really hoping it will become an
Oh, that would be
audiobook.
great, yeah.
Yeah, that's like my favorite form of reading.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm a big fan too. Like walk the dog. Like a book intake, yeah. That would be great. Have you looked into the process at all?
Not really.
No, okay,
I mentioned it to my publisher a while ago.
okay, yeah. I think that's a part of the process right there.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
You
I
gotta-
just don't know what the process
you gotta like
is.
tell somebody, and they do, yeah. I think that's the.
Yeah, I'll touch base again.
I am gonna start opening it up to the audience, question. If there are, questions in the audience, I think the process will be that you raise your hand. I think that would be that's the natural way to do it. So if you have a question, about the writing process that Amy is going through, or the book itself, you just raise your hand and then, somebody will deliver a microphone right to you. I see a hand right over here.
I have a question regarding your dreams that inspired this book. You said you had the same dream several times.
Yeah.
Approximately how many times did you have it?
At least a half a dozen times, but as soon as I wrote this
Or
and
half a
wrote it
dozen?
down, I haven't done it.
Half a dozen.
Yeah, 6-ish
I
times.
understand. And do you asked, you mentioned that you have dreams journals and you use your dreams as a source of inspiration.
Mhm.
Do you practice lucid dreaming?
I used to do that a lot when I was a kid.
Um,
Is there some lucid dreaming that happens in
Yes.
book too?
Yes, yeah, so I don't anymore, it kind of scares me, so.
Yes.
The idea of it, yeah, but yeah, I used to lucid dream very much when I was younger.
We've got a question over here, but I just wanted to expand a little bit, not on the lucid dreaming because it scares me. When was the very first dream when this figure presented themselves?
Ooh,
Because you said it was like
a
long time
I
before,
would have
so-
been a teenager.
about
Yeah,
the age of Aubrey.
yeah, yeah, so
Cool.
that's when it first started and then periodically.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can't wait till that return. So there's a question over there, Lisa.
Congratulations, Amy, that was an awesome reading. Always was, can't wait to read. The environment that you described was so saturated with imagery and vivid. It felt like a character in the book too. And did the environment sometimes sort of give a little nudge to the scene, or have an influence in a way that you didn't expect when you started writing these scenes?
Oh, I love that question. First, like, yes, Land is a character, especially within her dreams, because it shifts so much. And how she interacts with the land in different ways. Yeah, like definitely it's a character.
Thanks.
So all you have to do is put your hand up if you can. So no.
I've already told you I love this book. I finished it in less than 24 hours. It's an excellent read. It felt so familiar to me when I was reading it. Like you talked about the cooking already, but that just felt like my auntie in the way that she talked to us. And like when Ish put down tobacco for the first time and he was like questioning like, what do I do? And then Aubrey realized that's the first time he's ever done it before. That happened with my sister and I. The first time I asked her, like, can you go let this money make special goal? And he's like, I've never done it. It was like a shock moment for me that realizing that hadn't happened, that she hadn't learned it. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit, you already talked a bit about how your own family is part of the story, but maybe about how you decided what moments from your own family story to include and like the process for deciding what parts to leave out to protect your family as well.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that the characters like are my family. I think it's more that echo feeling, right? Where that there's sometimes something drawn from. I did not want to write characters that were my family, right? Because this is fiction, right? But definitely inspirations in some ways. Some of the interactions between the characters kind of had that essence to it, of familiarity. Um, but, and certainly like in thinking about the relationships between siblings, which can be complex, and if you had siblings and you're all close in age, there were squabbles. Right, that's just the realistic part of like growing up with siblings. So like they're not always like, oh, it's all like fancy glasses and sugar. There's some challenging moments, but I think they move together as a family. They love each other. You always come back to them. You so those were some of the things that I felt more wanting to make sure I reflected and wanted to, have a family that was strong together.
Hi. So knowing you from work from the university as a researcher, and also being like a prolific reader of fiction, naively, I have never really thought that the authors that I read are doing tons of research for their books. So I'm always thinking, they just have these stories in their head and they write them, right? So I'm just curious if you could just talk about what does it look like for research that you would have had to have done for writing the book? This is just what I'm curious about.
Yeah, so for this one, even in my other ones, a lot of that research comes through a lot of reading. And talking with people and sometimes sorting out through some of those ideas, even if it's like, I'll write passages and then, ask, can you read this? Like, does this make sense to you? Sometimes like, it's like, I'm so close, I have forced blinders on, I can't really see too much else. So that can be a challenging part. But with the research, it's, especially for this one here, it's looking at all of the different ways in which, yes, like the 7 teachings and the rules and ethics of behavior, reading other works that talk about those different teachings from that different Indigenous scholars have written about, and thinking about my own teachings and how I reflect that. So thinking about more of it comprehensively, but also trying to honor like what's true for myself. And when I'm thinking about some of the other works, like this more sci-fi one, some of that research was really looking at the different types of traditional activities and traditions and even games and pastimes, and how I can think about like the science aspect and trying to bridge the Western and the Anishinaabe together. So for that sci-fi one, it was looking at the idea of the aurora borealis. So I have a love of astronomy. I wanted to be like an astrophysicist when I was in high school. It was very much discouraged from a counselor to do that. And they were like, "Oh, you'd be the only woman." Yeah. So I include that love in other ways. So it's like this one's very much astronomy driven, the sci-fi one. Oh, okay, I've also missed the start with it. But Aurora Borealis, yes, there's a lot of science behind it. It's echoed in that story, but also the cultural aspect of what Aurora Borealis means for like Anishinaabe peoples, which is the souls of those who've passed on, right? And so there's like some superstitions around that too. So those were some things that I had echoed in there.
Cool. There is still time. If you, there's a question, so something.
Thanks, Amy. This is great. My question to you is, if you ever got stuck when you were writing this book, and if so, how did you kind of overcome that? If you could share it with us, that'd be great.
Definitely was stuck in writing this book. There's a this came from like an early version when I did my PhD. So if you want to like, in a literature perspective, compare like a first draft to like the finished product, this probably would be a good example. But I had some like certainly personal struggles during my PhD, and I almost didn't finish my PhD. And it was, being so close to being finished, and certainly support of family was really important then. And realizing that, yes, this is hard. And writing's also hard, and then doing a PhD is also very difficult. And at that point, it was just that idea of perseverance. And knowing that, yes, I could do it. It would take a lot of effort, but I could do it. So obviously I finished it.
Were there specific parts within the story that, that's where you found the block?
Ooh, a block came actually in how I wanted Aubrey to handle the initial like bullying from those two character
Like
girls.
the very first time she went into them?
Yeah. And I wanted to have something that, like I was stuck on that and how I wanted to write about how Aubrey would respond.
Right.
Yeah, that one tripped me up. Like I had that until that point. I'm like, oh, well, how would Aubrey respond? And certainly that idea of shock would come in, and definitely like the later moments. And, I tried to write her so that she was a much braver character than I was at that age.
That's the power of writing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you had perseverance to get through. Were there any tools or that you used to help with that? Or was it all just, I know I can do it, so I'm gonna do it?
Yeah, it was very much like a mental block. Yeah. So it was just, one page at a time kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw some more hands. I said, so all the way at the back. All the way at the back.
Amy. You mentioned that you like reading YA fiction and that you're kind of writing for a YA audience.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to young people who aspire to become writers, and perhaps advice you wish that you had been given as a young person that may have aided you in writing sooner? Or what advice do you wish you had been given as a young person who later became a writer?
To stop worrying about perfection. It's not possible. You will always find something to fix. And to try not and write like the books that you love so much, you need to find your own voice and find how your book would fit on that shelf.
Thank you, Amy. That was beautiful. I'm really excited to read this book. My question is, now that you're done, and are the characters living on? So are you in the shower and you're thinking about Aubrey doing something that you haven't written, that there's still live people in your thoughts?
Yeah. I definitely still think about them a lot, and I think about Aubrey a lot, and I think about Rukokum a lot. Sometimes I think about maybe doing a sequel, but I don't know. Definitely there are ties between the characters in all of my novels that I have planned. So they're all relations. Yes.
In the Amy verse.
Yes. Yeah, like that.
Yeah. That was one of the questions that I was gonna have too, is like, not necessarily sequel specific, but those characters, you know them so well, and you know that there's probably stories that didn't make it into here, that you have to like cut.
Yes.
Do you have, what was the hardest one to cut out? Did you have like a little side quest or a little side story that you were like, oh, I love it, but it just doesn't fit?
I mean, there were definitely scenes and moments. Like there was this
a whole scene around like the hand drum that her program had given her, and it was a whole part of this music assignment, but it didn't really like add a whole great deal to her journey.
Mhm.
And there were a lot of other cultural pieces that she was already engaging in. So that was a little hard to kind of remove, but it made sense to me.
Mhm.
And a question over here in the middle as well. I wonder why you invited this random guy to interview you? And more particularly, if there's a relationship between your practice and improv and your writing.
Oh, good question. So first, this is Steven Sims. So I do improv with Steven, so he's our teacher. And sorry, what was the other part? Oh, writing and improv. I have definitely found to just sometimes let go. Even though I have a plan. I always know to be flexible in that plan and let things go or let room for me to add or change. So even though it's written down, that whole saying of like it's not in stone, it's just a plan. I don't need to completely stick to it because you know it's my book and it's my writing. I can do it. Yeah.
I think we have time for another quick question if anybody's been sitting on that.
Last
Yes.
question right here.
Amy, thank you so much for this talk. I really enjoyed it. A question that I have is, so as a teacher, I think about using other texts or different forms of music or artistry, and as an artist yourself, I don't know if there's other pieces that you might envision kind of complementing the writing that you did, or other ways. Like I look for different access points for students to enter a text. So do you have any suggestions or ideas that might work really well in that way?
Certainly beadwork would work, you know, it would align really well with this particular text. Including, like, obviously she does loom work in here. So that would be a very strong direct connection. And you can also think about some of the different imagery that is in the novel. Even if it's from her dreams, and thinking about imagery in different artistic styles. So if you want to do something that's more realistic or impressionistic or something a bit more contemporary, that I think that would be an interesting way to look at our own perspectives of a scene, a dream, and being able to think about it from different points of view and see how their other classmates are perceiving the same thing. Yeah.
I think we might even have time for another one.
If you thought you lost your chance,
There's another one.
you've received the actual chance. So if there is a question inside you, and you're like, I didn't know if I was going to ask it. Now's your chance.
That's about the cover art.
Oh, so the cover art, Rebecca Brackett, she's an Indigenous artist. The publisher invited me to give them like a list of artists I would like to think about for the cover, and I was like, well, in a good way. So Rebecca, she does really beautiful lino cut works. And she does digital versions of those as well. So I had found her through her Instagram and just fell in love with her style. So she was obviously like a person I wanted the publisher to get in touch with. So happily she did get in touch, and we worked with her, and she was really lovely to work with. And I gave her some suggestions, but this kind of exceeded my expectations. It's just beautiful work. And I also really love how it's like partially glossy.
Yeah, it's really.
Yeah, I think that was from Catherine, the owner, who suggested that. So, yes, it was a beautiful choice.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Let's all give Amy some love right now.
Okay, all right, well, let's move on to the signing portion of the evening, which will take place to my right at the table. Feel free to have a copy of the book signed before you pay for it, just as long as you visit the cash desk. That's what you will. Give another huge thank you again to HighWater Press for publishing this book. Of course, to Stephen Sims as well for hosting tonight graciously. Thank you. And of course, another huge warm thank you to Amy Lynn Farrell. Everybody, thank you.